Now let's go ahead and create the final view of our application, which will be our users index that admins have access to. So I'm going to just go ahead and stop the server, and now I'm going to Control-Shift F9 to delete all of our breakpoints, and we'll go ahead and make a commit. All right, cool. So let's head into our profile controller and work on this final view for our application. So we had a detail view. So what I'd like to do now is to go ahead and create our index view. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and create a variable profiles. And what we'll do is we'll call on our user service. And in fact, let's say we want to like order by some value, just to show you that we can do this in LINQ. So I can say like order by descending, and we'll control parade to bring LINQ in. And then we can say like user rating, for instance. And now we're going to select each of those users we get back into a new profile model. And so we'll set their email, username, profile image URL, user rating, and the member since date. And then what we can do here is go ahead and create our model, which would be a new profile list model. And profiles will just be this list of profile models that we just selected into. And we'll go ahead and return the view and pass it to model. Okay, great. And now for the view itself, we can head into the profile directory and then the index view. All right, so we're going to keep this pretty simple, but then of course you could make it much fancier if you like. So this will be our profile list model. You could also call it a profile index model. And so we'll just create a table here, some basic bootstrap styling with an ID of our user index table. And maybe on this table we'll create a t-head, and so we'll have a row with some headings, like we'll just say like image, and then maybe username, email, member since, and we could have their rating. Okay, and then the t-body, where we could just do something very simple. We could have a for each loop and say for each var profile in profiles, and that should be model.profiles, of course. We'll create a new row for each of those cases, and we'll have it class user row. And so I'll create a TD to hold the user profile image. And be sure you grab the profile image URL here and not the iForm file upload property. Okay, and then we could just have data cells here for the other properties. All right, so that's a pretty simple page. Let's fix this property name. Yeah, just a simple index listing, perhaps one of the simplest types of views that we have created in this application. So let's go ahead and start the server and see if we can visit our page. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and sign in. And we'll try to visit the View Users page. All right, so we are getting the list of users out here, and we need to create a class in order to see the user's profile image here in our CSS. But it looks like we're getting the usernames out and the email and the member sense values for users that were created after we fixed the login page, and then a user rating for this top user that we use to actually test out the new rating manager that we have. So let's go ahead and just push this off to a side here, and I'll do the same with Visual Studio and just give us a little bit more space here. And now I'll head over into our www root and then CSS to visit site.css. And if we inspect the cell, I'm going to go ahead and put this on the bottom as well. So if we inspect the cell where we expect to see the user image, you can see that this is a class user profile pic. So let's go ahead and create a CSS class for that. So I'm going to scroll down here and add a section here for user profile index. And so we had a class user profile pic, and we'll just set a height and width on it. Okay, so let's go ahead and refresh the page here. And we may need to shift refresh to get a clean cache. And so, yeah, so we have a user image for the user whom we have uploaded an image for. So likewise, if we go ahead to our profile here as the admin user and we browse and upload an image, so there's our image. Looks like we need to do some resizing here as well, so we'll leave this open. But if we head back to our user index and refresh the page, we can see that here. So actually we need to make sure that in both places we set the image to 100% to fill this div, which is a little bit of a trick because the images that we're uploading are squares already, and then we're setting a height and width of 140 pixels each on the divs that these images are contained in. And so if you wanted to be more clever with it, then as I mentioned in a previous video, you'd have an intermediate service which would maybe implement something like image magic and actually crop or resize your profile images into squares of an appropriate size. That would be good for managing page loading too, to make sure you're not loading resources bigger than you actually need. So let's head back to site.css here. And what I'm going to do is say background size of 100%. And now if I refresh the page or shift refresh, the images are sized to the square div. Likewise, on our profile page here, what I need to do is to inspect this element, and we gave this a div ID of user profile image. What I'm going to do is just create an ID here for user profile image and set our background size to 100%. And really, since there are a number of places we're kind of using this trick, I should probably just have like a class that I can append to any of the images, say like in the forum or on any post or anything, that just might be something like fill square for images, and then set the background size to 100%. So this would be something that you could reuse and might be a little bit neater than the sort of Slack style of CSS that I've done here and kind of created classes and IDs as I needed them. So let's go ahead and shift refresh the page. And so we can see that that's looking a little bit better. And you could resize the buttons here. Things look a little bit neater if you like. One thing that is bugging me is I'd like to go ahead and fix some of the styles throughout the site in little places. For example, up here in the nav bar, and then on our forums listing, I'd like to get this up to shape a little bit. And as well, I would like to make our post with post replies look a little bit nicer as well. So let's go ahead and fix up the CSS here and there. And as I've mentioned previously, the final CSS for this, at least in the final state that it's in for this particular series, is going to be supplied with all the files for this course. So you should be able to find a download link for it, and you should be able to use it as long as you've named your various HTML elements as I have in this series, which by the way could use a little bit of cleaning up. In any case, let's go ahead and at least clean up what we have here. So on our post index, if I inspect the replies section here, you can see that I have this reply author container and a row reply content that it's contained in. And then in the author container, I've got a few more divs. So let's start with this div class reply content. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and create a reply section here. And we'll say reply content. And we're going to set the display on this to table. And then the background color to white. And then we'll set a border on the bottom of each of these replies. And then width, we'll just say inherit. Okay, so that should cause these replies to be the same width here as the actual post. And so that's starting to look a little bit better. Notice also that I have this row just above the replies where we can say post reply, and that contains a span with a button in it. And so I'm going to apply some styling to this row as well. So I'm going to close some of our windows here and then head over into our post index. And then down here where I have a row where we say if the user is authenticated, give them the ability to show this row and post to reply. I'm going to go ahead and give this an ID of post reply row. And then in our CSS, what I'm going to do is set a background color here of like 3F. And then apply some padding as well because I think it looks a little cramped. And so if we refresh now, Control Shift Refresh, we get this kind of blue purple divider here. And now we need to clean up our post reply area as well. And so if we reinspect this area, this is our reply content row. And then within here we have our reply author container and reply content container. And so I'm just going to go ahead and build those out here. So we'll set the display as table cell and then padding of 12 pixels. And then our reply author container will do the same. And since that's the case, we can actually just say comma dot reply author container. All right, so let's Control Shift and refresh this page. And so that cleans this up just a little bit. Now I'd like to actually clean up the way that the usernames and the dates are appearing here. So if we inspect these, we can see that the date is in a span and the admin label is in a div with class isAdmin, and then we have the smaller class on it. So let's go ahead and get this looking a little bit nicer. So for isAdmin, we're going to display inline block. Put a little bit of padding around it. And then we're going to give it like a kind of a yellowish background color. And the font itself will be black. And the font family here we'll set to Roboto Mono. Alright, so we'll Control Shift refresh this. And so that's starting to look a little bit better. Now let's go ahead and implement this smaller class. Or we'll set the font size equal to 0.8 EM. Okay, cool. So that's starting to look a little bit nicer. Okay, let's make the date look a little bit smaller than it is. So under post date here, let's go ahead and make sure we get this class applied here to the span in our reply view. I'm sorry, in our post view. So let's go to our post index, which is here, so our post index, and then we scroll down to the date here, which is in reply.created. We're going to apply the class post date here. And then I'd also like to make sure that that gets applied up here in the actual post itself. And there's a typo here, so this should be post date instead of post data. Okay, so this is looking all right. And so if we go back to the page and we Control Shift refresh again. So that's looking a little bit cleaner here. I like the monospace font here for the dates. And you could continue to format this, you know, to your liking. Let's make sure it looks okay if we post a second reply. Okay, so we get that border between replies. You may consider making the replies like a slightly darker background or something to distinguish them from the post a little bit. And I'd also like to put a little bit of space here between the post reply row and the post itself, because we have that box shadow around the post. I think that'll look nice. So the way that I'm going to do that is in the view here, we have this div, this empty div with the ID reply divider. And so let's go ahead and create our reply divider in our site.css file. And I'm just going to create that with some of our other post CSS. Just like to keep it roughly organized because, as I said, I think I'd like to pull these out into separate CSS files in the future. So I'm going to set a height here of 2 pixels and then the margin bottom of 12 pixels. Okay, and now we'll go ahead and revisit the page and Control Shift refresh. And so that kind of separates our replies from our post a little bit.